I thought this was where we fuck with Darth Dawkins.
Oh, sorry.
He ran.
He ran.
He's
He
here
ran.
now.
I already ran him out of the channel.
Engaging.
He just crawled back, but he won't speak.
Has anybody done the argument for miracles against him? Because he gave me a really nonsensical answer last time. I'm really
Can we
What
not
is
talk
the
about
argument
Darth
for
for
miracles?
like 5 minutes?
The argument of
Yeah, that's
the argument for miracles is that if God is contingent on the laws of nature, then miracles disprove God because they break the laws of nature.
If God is contingent on the law, who
I don't
theorized
think
that
anyone
God is contingent on it?
contingent on the
Darth
laws
says
of
that.
nature.
There's no
Darth-
way
well,
Darth
Darth
says
says
that
that
God is
that sounds
contingent on
That
anything.
sounds like a
Hold up,
Darth
that-
argument to me.
What'd you say?
I said that sounds like a Darth argument to me. He frequently says.
Yeah,
things-
don't put too much stock in what Squishy says. She's not very smart.
Wait, Duncan, do you think God is
I mean, you're
contingent
the
on
one
the
that
laws
keeps
of
on
nature?
lying about your own knowledge limitations, Darth. So why would I take your opinion on it seriously?
Can we just clarify the narrow
Well, you
point
can't
of
say
whether
while
he thinks
lying is
God is
wrong, so, I
contingent on the
mean-
laws of nature? What's your view on that, Darth?
What's my view on what?
Whether God is contingent on the laws of nature. That's how squishy.
Oh, that's just the height of
Or do the laws
absurdity.
of
Anybody,
Well, oh wait, I can hear
anybody
myself in his
who-
background.
Please don't interrupt.
No,
Okay,
he's
go on,
supposed to have
Darth.
muted.
yeah. If she was more well versed in just the basics of theology, she wouldn't make such a stupid statement. God is a se, meaning he is simply non-dependent on anything that is external to himself.
But if the laws of nature prove God exists, then him breaking the law.
What makes you think that the laws are broken?
A miracle is breaking the laws of nature. Don't you agree?
How do you know that? How do you know that?
Is that not generally what defines a miracle? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what defines a
No.
miracle. Otherwise, it's just an
No.
event.
Yeah, if it's
No,
not
no.
Oh, wait,
the
hold up a
mistakes
minute.
in
Let me
doing it
finish my
again.
sentence before you interrupt me.
You
Darth.
interrupted him, dummy.
When
Wait,
something
Darth can
when
define the miracle.
the
It's...
way okay, but you got to understand that if it's not supernatural, then it's not a miracle.
No, Darth can define it.
No,
No, not at all. Supernatural. Do you have any idea what the root word for miracle in the Bible is?
Tell me.
So you don't know.
It's like
The
wonder.
answer is, it comes from the Greek word meaning power. We get our word dynamite from it. It's dunamis. It simply means that there is an amazing event that causes surprise, wonder, bewilderment, astonishment that is attributed to God acting. Okay. Now, God producing an amazing phenomenon does not necessarily entail that the laws of nature have been suspended.
It says so in the definition of miracle.
no.
Talking
In
about,
actual-
we're talking about miracles from a biblical perspective.
Yeah, miracles in the
We're
Bible
talking about
are events
Darth's
that
made
are,
up
hold
ad
a
hoc
second.
version of the words.
Hold up a second.
Oh.
Miracles in the Bible are
One at a
explained
time.
as not explicable by nature or scientific laws. That is it.
Yeah, where's the idea that certain amazing, highly unusual events that people will attribute as a manifestation of God is an abrogation of the general laws of nature? Where'd you get that from?
So here's where we go down the rabbit hole, where any definition that contradicts Darth is just disregarded, and he redefines every single word
Yeah.
systematically.
No,
so
you're not.
what
What you're not
That's
understanding.
exactly what you just did,
listen,
Darth.
No,
That's what you do every time you're in these arguments, Darth. That's all you
Just
do.
called it tasteless.
Let me explain to you why you're incorrect. When you go see some of the more elite magicians, you'll see certain amazing phenomenon that will cause wonder and awe, but you don't know how they did it. Now, it appears to the viewer
Oh, here it
as
is.
though the laws of nature have been abrogated or suspended. But while you're sitting there in the audience and you have, like a suspension of disbelief, you realize that there's something that you are not observing background information that you don't have access to that is accounting for this phenomenon that appears as though the laws of nature have been violated.
So
Let
is
me
it
let me
God
have
in
this for a
the
second,
gap?
Squishy. Let me have
Now,
this.
the
Let me have
point-
this,
The God in the
please.
gap
The
zone.
Let me respond.
That's exactly what magic
the point the
You know what,
point is that
let Claire
when
go,
God
Damn it.
providentially intervenes and produces an event that is amazing or breathtaking or whatever, a human being might interpret that amazing event as an abrogation of the laws of nature, but they can't demonstrate that it necessarily follows that it is.
Okay, Darth. So let's unpack this claim. All right. So are the miracles of the Bible true? Did they occur? Can we use them as examples to compare your argument you just made to?
Do I hold
What
that
you're
they're
saying
actual?
happened?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So please explain what trick or caveat of physics could allow you to feed 1,000 people to the point where they are sufficiently full with what was it, like 3 fish and a loaf of bread? How many? Can you explain the process by which you would expand the nutritional value of that so it would be sufficient for 1,000 plus people?
Could I explain the means by which God produced that amazing effect? No, I couldn't.
Okay, so can you also can you explain to me without divorcing yourself from the laws of physics how
I didn't hear
God?
the first part.
Okay, could you explain to me how, without divorcing yourself from the laws of physics, how God could stop the world spinning for 3 days so that the sun would always be shining so that Israel wouldn't start losing the battle against whoever the fuck they were fighting? I don't remember who they were fighting.
I can't.
Without
I couldn't
without the
explain it.
atmosphere burning off, without everyone on the planet being thrown into space because of the fact that all that energy would then be transferred to them when it was suddenly stopped, with all these crazy entailments that would come from that, without like 3,000-mile-an-hour winds happening as the atmosphere continued to rotate when the planet stopped spinning. There's all these problems, and you're saying
No,
that
he
they
could
don't
easily
violate
do
the laws
that.
of physics, but you can't articulate how they're not violating the laws of physics.
That's easily
They're violating all
conceivable,
kinds of
actually.
laws of physics.
I once heard a
Dawkins
physicist.
to argue his claim, please.
No,
I once
God would
heard
ju-
a
go.
physicist explain. A physicist was discussing the nature of quantum mechanics,
Oh,
and
boy.
he made reference to a military soldier on a statue of a military officer on a brass horse, and he said,
Okay.
at a quantum level, there's nothing
Brass or
really
bronze?
preventing this horse and rider from jumping down and galloping away. Now,
That's incoherent as shit. That guy was full of shit if that actually happened.
Yeah, if you're gonna overtalk me in midst of an answer, then you won't
Go
get
ahead.
any further
Go ahead and
response.
finish, please. Go ahead and finish.
If you're gonna
please.
behave like a douchebag, you're gonna be treated like one. Okay. Now, the point of this illustration is I'm not even agreeing with it. What he's saying is that there can be changes that occur at a quantum level that produce a higher level chain reaction that would be amazing or surprising. Now, the miracles in the Bible may be interpreted as an abrogation or a violation or a breaking of the laws of nature, but it doesn't necessarily follow that they do. When in Hebrews 1, where it says he upholds all things by the power of his will, God's power supersedes any natural laws that are in place. Not that they are abrogated, but they are superseded. For example, the reason why an
Okay, Darth.
airplane, I'm
Can I
not done
respond
yet.
now that you've
I'm
made
not
this point?
done yet. When an airplane is flying in the air, it doesn't crash because there are certain higher level laws that supersede other laws such as gravitation. So aerodynamics,
That is not what's happening.
the laws of aerodynamics, when certain states of affairs are in a particular way, it supersedes the law of gravity.
Okay, no, nothing is being superseded. What's happening when a plane flies is another force is acting more strongly than gravity. Gravity is
That's what
still
I
there.
said.
It's still
That's
acting. It's not being
That's
suspended.
exactly what I said.
That's not what you
So
said.
you're agreeing with me.
Okay.
he did.
You can't do the things that we just described as my examples without literally breaking things like the conservation of energy and a number of other things like that, the conservation of momentum. So what you're really saying is God's not breaking. God's not breaking. Let me finish. I just let you fucking ramble.
You're not
Let me fucking
conversing,
finish.
Darth. Shut
When
up.
you say the conversation of energy, are you referring to the second law of
Conservation.
thermodynamics?
Darth.
Are you talking about the first and second law of thermodynamics?
No,
Yeah,
it's
we
not
are talking about that.
thermodynamics. No,
But it's not
conservation
just
of energy and
thermodynamics.
momentum are not thermodynamics.
Yeah, high IQ. Are you referring to the first law of thermodynamics?
That's not that is entailed in the first law of thermodynamics, but it's not the only thing that
No,
references those as
I'm asking
facts.
you a question. You said the conservation of
Okay,
energy.
can I finish my
Are
statement
you
before you fucking
referring?
try to derail?
Well, you can go on, but I just don't know what you're talking about. Go ahead.
Okay, you cannot know what I'm talking about until I'm done speaking. Thank you. That's fine. I can accept that. So what I was going back to saying is, so what you're really saying in all this is that God cannot break the laws of physics by breaking the laws of physics. So what you're really saying is that you admit that these miracles are breaking or suspending the laws of physics. You're just
No.
choosing to rephrase it and ignore that fact because
No.
the way that
No.
Squishy pointed out to you was
No,
inconvenient for your argument.
that's a complete.
Yes, it is.
That's a complete misrepresentation of what I said.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Okay, you're changing. You're changing.
Let me
break
explain. Let me
with
explain something
suspend,
to you.
but the effect
Okay.
is the same.
Let me explain something to you. Okay. Since God upholds all things by the power of His will, God at any moment can supersede the regularities themselves that do not change. So
Okay,
there is
can you
no
go ahead and
now.
impact
I'm not done
supersede
yet.
and
I'm
break?
not done yet. Okay.
Explain the
Now,
difference.
I'm not done yet. Now, the
a
problem.
conversation.
The problem. Yeah. Listen. If you want to keep on over talking me, high IQ, I don't want to have to mute you. Now, God superseding and producing certain events that are amazing or awe-inspiring may be interpreted by the human observer as being a violation of the laws of nature or an abrogation, but it doesn't necessarily follow. If you take a look at the lecture by physicist David Tong on YouTube, it's a great lecture on physics. And at the end of his lecture on physics, and as far as I know, he's not a Bible thumper like me, he says, this is our current understanding, the way things are actually working and operating down at a quantum level. But, he adds at the very conclusion, we could be wrong about it because we're looking at it and interpreting it from a wrong perspective or angle. So when you say that miracles are necessarily an abrogation of the laws of nature, it doesn't necessarily follow, because you're saying it's an abrogation of the laws of nature because of the perspective that you're looking at it, and you're deriving an interpretation based upon your alleged perspective.
Right.
Okay, so would you feel it would be accurate? The definition, the dictionary definition that we referenced earlier, would you feel that it would be 100% accurate if you simply change the words so that it said supersede instead of violate?
I'm not sure what dictionary definition are you invoking?
Someone read to you a different dictionary definition of the word miracle that said that they were actions that could not be explained by the laws of nature.
Right. So
you're going to replace
an event
in which the laws of nature supersede. Consider that a coherent definition.
An event that cannot be accounted for by the laws of nature. It does not necessarily follow from that that any of the laws have been abrogated.
Claire, you're gonna have to ask again because he overtalked your entire question.
Okay, so would you consider that definition valid if we change the word to superseded instead of whatever the fuck it was? I don't even fucking remember it because you can't stop fucking overtalking me and actually address it.
Well, maybe you should take your Ritalin.
What?
No, maybe you should actually address me instead of fucking talking in circles.
Yeah, if you can't focus on the conversation, you shouldn't.
I can't focus because it's so fucking stupid. It can't hold my attention. Dude.
Listen.
Okay, well then we'll move on. Then I'll ignore you from here on out.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and look it up so I can read it back to you verbatim. So you know exactly what it is. Yeah, please do.
Okay, it's a miracle is an event not explicable by nature or scientific law. Such an event may be attributed to a supernatural being, magic, or a miracle worker, a saint, or a religious leader. Just anything divinely intervent. Yeah, divine intervention.
Yeah, and so what about that? What about that definition?
So you would consider that accurate?
Do you think that hold on a second, you're over talking me. If you're going to behave like an impetuous little child, you will be ignored. Okay.
Darth, you told me that you didn't know what I was talking about.
I'll tell you one more time. If you're going to behave like an impetuous little child, you're going to be ignored. You've now been warned a third time.
Darth,
Yeah.
this isn't a conversation.
Now, Squishy, what in that definition that you just read
Listen to him
is
avoid answering
problematic?
it, so I
Okay,
can't make my
okay,
next
all
point.
right, good. Now your server muted. Okay, if you're going to be impulsive and troll, you're going to get server
Does
muted.
Darth have mute rights in here?
Didn't
Yeah, I
told
do.
you.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, so Squishy, go
What do
ahead.
you have? What's your issue with that definition, Darth?
I said, how is that definition problematic in regards to a Christian view on miracles?
That was you're the one who contested the definition, Darth.
No, I don't.
Remember?
I don't recall contesting the definition you just read.
Yeah, and then you went on this whole rant about how.
Yeah,
your
the definition that
is-
you just
Hold up a
read.
second.
Why
you
is that
can calm
problematic?
down. You can calm down a little bit so I can.
I'm perfectly calm, sweetheart.
No, you sound
Can I
really
talk?
high strung. But what I was trying to say was that the fact that it talks about that it's not explicable by nature or scientific laws, that it's pretty much it's
By
defining.
our perception of those laws.
Yeah,
as I
that
understand what Philip is saying.
Yeah, nowhere in the definition does it say by our perception of laws. That's just Darth adding
Right,
words.
right, but it's implicit. It's completely
Yeah,
implicit.
the fact that it's inexplicable does not mean that the laws of nature that God instituted and that He upholds, that they're being violated or abrogated.
Basically,
Doesn't a
as I
miracle
understand it-
entail that it's violating some sort of law?
No, a violation would mean that the law itself was not in place, as opposed to it being superseded.
That doesn't make sense, Darth.
Sure, it makes sense.
I'm following.
Since
Somebody else explain it. Hold up a second.
Since
Darth,
God's
hold up a
power
second.
does
Darth,
God's
no,
power
hold up a
does
second.
God listen?
Hold up.
You
But
addressed me to begin with. If you're going to
I
behave
wanna
this way,
hear if
then I will
somebody
put you
else
on ignore
got
before.
it.
Now, the Bible teaches that God upholds all things by the power of His will. So the power of God's will supersedes all states of affairs,
Why are you over
including
talking and
the
acting like a child,
regularities
Darth?
that He institutes.
He doesn't. It's okay.
Okay.
I didn't hear what you said because you overtalked me.
Okay. Then we're done. If you want to be a troll, you get server muted. Okay. Goodbye. Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, no one is trolling you, by the way. You just disagree with them and mute them.
Okay. Well, I beg to differ with you.
Yeah, I know that. You're just asking questions where, how do you know that? How do you know that? Dude, you cannot ever know anything. So when people say I cannot know that, that's not because you're right. That's because you cannot know anything at all. You just corner people. We've talked about this. We've told about you.
Do you
People
know that? Do you know that?
No, obviously not.
Just to
Okay,
clarify,
good. You're a walking contradiction. Next.
So
No,
just-
I'm not.
Just to clarify,
You're
Darth,
just improper.
you believe that a miracle has occurred when what a person perceives to be the laws of nature is violated.
And a miracle is an amazing an event that causes shock, awe, wonder, with people generally reacting that this was the hand of God. Now, in some instances, people may not react that way. For example, in the account of the rich man and Lazarus, Abraham told the dead man of the rich man, he said, even if somebody is raised from the dead, they won't believe. If they don't believe Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded if somebody raises from the dead. So a miracle not everyone will necessarily respond by attributing that phenomenon to the power of God, but generally people do.
Okay.
Obviously, that can happen.
So, like,
Like a
if
fool
Jesus
people
turned water
people
into wine, but people
in a
didn't
miracle.
acknowledge it, it wouldn't be a miracle? Or people didn't think God was responsible?
I'm just wondering where in the definition does it say that it supersedes?
Who unmuted Squishy?
You did, Darth.
No, I did not.
You did.
Okay, fine. Now, who's ever doing it, we'll find out from the server logs, and then we'll have it out with Kalo. So do it again, and we'll see what happens.
Oh, so Squishy is avoiding moderation. That's the problem. She left the server and then she joined back.
Okay, all right. So the point is, this is an old canard that Squishy brings up because she doesn't have two brain cells to rub together to bring up anything else, right? So people interpret that miracles are an abrogation or a violation of the laws of nature, but that's not necessarily the case. It's that simple. But they don't care about that.
Can we get into a little bit of this like superseding relation? So like
sure, but I only have about 15 minutes and then I have to go.
Okay, just really quick then. So there might be, you might have like a rule of thumb that says like I'm gonna do this unless Y happens, and so then you act according to the even when you don't. So like when Y happens, you do something differently than what you would have done, but you're still following the rule, right? So if the idea is like, okay, conservation of energy unless God intervenes or something like that, because it's like at a lower level of priority than like God's.
Let me just ask you, when you say the conservation of energy, are you referring to the first and second law of thermodynamics?
I'd have to consult those before I can say really.
Yeah, the conservation of energy, as I'm acquainted with it, refers to the first law of thermodynamics. It says matter and energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Hey. That's how it's put in a rudimentary way. Right? Is that what you mean?
The ones that I'm familiar with, I don't know if they come from thermodynamics. They come from something called NERDAs, which has to do with like diffeomorphisms of like the Lagrangian operator.
I wouldn't be familiar with that. The only conservation of energy that I'm familiar with is the first and second law of thermodynamics. See what the question that the question that Squissy's trying to raise as a defeater is just a very inept attempt to try to attack the actuality of the God of the Bible, saying that, well, if you believe in the God of the Bible and you believe in miracles, then you can't believe that there's a uniformity of nature, because then they will assert because miracles violate or abrogate the laws of nature. But they haven't demonstrated that in order for a miracle to occur, that the laws of nature have to be even suspended as opposed to them being superseded.
It just sounds to me like this is more to do with like the notion of like any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Yeah, when you stalk and you troll Star Monkey and you get server muted, you have no one to blame but yourself.
I mean, Darth, I kind of want to play devil's advocate with. Don't you think an event like the resurrection of Jesus disrupts the uniformity of nature?
No, the resurrection supersedes the uniformity of nature.
But okay, if we accept that things like resurrections can occur, don't you think we can no longer?
And the uniformity of nature, as an actuality itself, is indicative of the God of the Bible. Because if you say no, if you object to that, I have a question for you. It is the uniformity of nature evidence of God?
How is nature uniform if its uniform is disrupted by events like the resurrection?
Yeah, like I guess.
What does it mean to be uniform?
Yeah,
who said the uniformity of nature is disrupted?
What is the uniformity of nature?
When you observe a highly skilled and professional magician, let's say you go to a Las Vegas show.
This is the argument.
And they produce, where let's say he cuts a woman in half, then he puts her back together again, and the woman walks out of the box whole. Now, you realize that he hasn't really cut the woman in half, but he's done something behind the scenes that has the appearance as though the laws of nature have been abrogated or violated. Okay. Now, if you
they haven't even been superseded here, right?
But I don't think that's analogous to our example.
That's not the point. That there is an unseen events in the Magician's Act. There's unseen events that produce visually and cognitively where one interprets that the laws of nature have been violated. Well, if you can interpret it in that light, then we can also say that there are unseen events that happen at the bottom level of why things exist at all, namely the power of God, then that means that certain events can occur without the laws of nature being abrogated. It is just simply that the cognitive reaction that it is violated. Now, observations, when we talk about empirical observations are not, they are inherently theory laden. So if you're going to say that a certain event violates the laws of nature, that's a cognitive filtering.
So
how
what
did
is
you
the
determine?
Can I have a
how
turn?
did- yeah,
Can I have a turn,
how is it?
please?
Yeah, and I'll be done in a second. If somebody is going to assert that miracles are, in fact, a violation as opposed to a superseding of the laws of nature, they're going to have to make a case for that.
Okay, my turn.
I think like you using violation and supersede here, it's just semantic garbage, right? And the problem with the example you brought up is that you don't believe that Jesus' resurrection was some kind of illusion. You believe it was a literal resurrection. The problem here is, right, if events like that can happen, right? If people that are dead can be resurrected, then we don't really have reason to believe that nature is uniform, right? If it happened before, then it could happen again, right?
Technically, no. So like technically you could have that, like, we just don't know what the full set of laws are, but you would still have
Exactly.
uniformity as long as the entire set of laws, both like known
Look,
and
that's a good point. For example, I asked somebody raised the falsification criterion, and I turned the tables on them, and I said, what event would falsify the uniformity of nature? And they didn't realize the nature of the trap question, and so they fell for the trap, and they said, well, if I saw a pig fly. You see, that wouldn't violate that wouldn't justify that the laws of nature would violate. What it would show is what how do you say your name? Boyle.
Well, people call me Bali.
Okay, what Bali just said would apply. It means
Okay, just like modify our understanding of the law.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
So if the issue,
So miracles will be attacked or will be used as an example, as a defeater, that Christians cannot believe in the uniformity of nature if they believe in miracles. But it's a sophist line of reasoning. It's really not very clever.
so the issue is if we're unaware exhaustively of these things in which can't not necessarily preclude miracles, then how can they say it's a violation necessarily?
And you see, let's just start with the law of nature. Anyway, if anyone affirms that there are laws of nature with no God needed, how do they account that there are laws of nature? Based upon what? The reason why we as Christians can say there are laws of nature is because God has, through his revelatory acts, through natural and special revelation, has made us to know that nature operates in some law-like and regular ways. If you call into question the God of the Bible's existence for whatever reason, then how is the concept of the laws of nature even viable? Based upon what?
So yeah, I mean, you could just bite the bullet on that though, right? And say just not be a scientific realist and say that like science is just like a useful way, like a useful language for
You mean like an
building
instrument?
things.
Instrumental?
Yeah, exactly.
Hey Darth, can I check my understanding quick?
Go ahead. I got 5 minutes, and then I gotta go.
Gotcha. In the prior conversation, would you say that God would be a stronger natural force, just like a bird taking flight would mean the laws of aerodynamics would supersede the law of gravity, pulling them down?
Well, I wouldn't affix the term natural to God, because that would have weird implications. What I would say is God is the personal absolute, the ground of all being, as to why anything exists, and it exists in the way that it does. And so God how should I put
Phone's ringing.
Yeah, that's okay. God superintends and supersedes everything everywhere. Anyway.
Okay, I have a question for Darth, if Darth doesn't mind me asking. I'll just go ahead. hypothetically, Darth, if I were to be put in a self-defense situation where I needed to gun down an entire crowd of homosexuals, what firearm would you recommend to most effectively make sure none of the homosexuals survive? Thank you.
AK-47.
Thank you.